Karen reported my guest to the HOA didn't know they're off-duty detectives. It was supposed to be a quiet Sunday cookout. Just a few friends from the force, off-duty for once, some burgers, cold beer, the game playing low in the background. Nothing fancy, nothing wild, until she showed up. Karen Bixby, president self-appointed of the Greater Meadowview Neighborhood Enhancement Task Force, which, I'd later confirm, wasn't a thing, not registered, not legal, not recognized by anyone except her printer, and maybe her cat. She came storming across the cul-de-sac while I was flipping burgers. Clipboard in hand, beige sun visor tilted like a general surveying a battlefield. "You can't park here," she snapped, pointing to the curb where my friend Leo's truck sat. Leo, a homicide detective with 21 years under his belt, had just cracked a cold one. "Excuse me," I asked, thinking she was joking. "That vehicle is in violation of our residential visual code," she declared. "This isn't a public parking lot." Leo stood up slowly. "I'm visiting a friend. That friend owns this home." Karen didn't back down. "And that doesn't exempt you from neighborhood ordinances." I set the spatula down. "Karen, there's no HOA here. You know that." She waved her clipboard. "Not anymore. But there's a neighborhood preservation pact now." I blinked. "You made that up last month." "It was voted on," she sniffed. "By who? By me and the advisory board." Leo looked at me, then at her. "Ma'am, are you attempting to issue a formal notice under a non-recognized charter?" Karen narrowed her eyes. "Who are you to question me?" Leo reached into his wallet and flipped open a badge. Karen flinched. "Oh, yeah. Oh." Karen didn't retreat. Not yet. She stood there, trying to recover from the shock of seeing a badge she hadn't issued. Leo tucked his back in his jacket and went back to his beer like she was just a poorly trained mall cop instead of a serious threat. But I knew better. Karen wasn't just someone who liked rules. She needed to enforce them, needed to be seen enforcing them. And when her authority was challenged, she doubled down. "This is harassment," she muttered, pulling out her phone. I crossed my arms. "Karen, we've had this conversation. There is no active HOA here, no charter. You're just printing things and harassing residents. You'll be hearing from compliance," she said, turning sharply and storming back across the street. Leo shook his head. "She's got no idea who she's messing with." "Oh, she'll find out," I muttered. "Soon." Now, let me back up a second. My name's James Rivers. I'm a 38-year-old crime analyst for the state. Moved out to Meadowview 2 years ago after a decade working cases in Atlanta. I bought the place cash, no HOA, no surprises. I knew this neighborhood had its quirks. Mostly retirees, quiet folks. One local Facebook group that argued over trash day and whether squirrels counted as pests or pets. And then there was Karen. She wasn't elected. She wasn't appointed. She was just there. Loud, relentless, obsessive, always citing ordinances no one could find, quoting bylaws that didn't exist. She made up zones, threatened lawn citations, and acted like God gave her a gavel. The worst part, people listened, especially the timid ones. She had them scared of their own porches. After the BBQ, things got worse. The very next morning, a notice was taped to my mailbox. Violation, unauthorized gathering, exceeding community tranquility levels. Under that, a $150 community impact fee. And just beneath that, failure to remit payment within 72 hours may result in formal HOA disciplinary action. The problem? There was no HOA, which meant this was fraud, and now it was on paper. I took it to my buddy Ben, one of the other guys at the BBQ. He's not just a detective. He's internal affairs. He laughed so hard he nearly dropped his coffee. "She's committing mail fraud," he said. "You realize that?" "Right, I did. But now we had it in writing, and I wanted to know how far it went. So we started digging. Ben ran the so-called Greater Meadowview Neighborhood Enhancement Task Force through state business records. No such group registered. No LLC. No 501c4, nothing. We checked the website listed on the flyer. It was registered using a burner domain out of Nevada, connected to a private mailbox in a strip mall. Anonymous hosting, paid through a third-party app. In other words, someone was trying to look official without being official. That week, we started hearing from neighbors. An older man down the street, Mr. Cole, said he'd paid Karen over $800 in tree overhang violations. Another neighbor, Sophia, said Karen fined her $200 for a non-regulation dog breed when her niece visited with a beagle. A freaking beagle. Karen had built an empire of fear, and now that someone pushed back, she was spiraling. Friday afternoon, she struck again. Ben's car, still parked in my driveway, had its back windshield smashed in, right in broad daylight. No witnesses, no cameras, just a brick and a note stuck under the wiper. Take your friends and leave. This neighborhood has rules. She signed it, compliance enforcement. We filed a formal report with local PD, and I made sure they knew exactly who the car belonged to and what he did for a living. By Monday morning, we had a full team building a case file, photos of citations, audio clips of Karen threatening residents, screenshots of emails demanding payments, a list of addresses that had violations posted. We'd uncovered over 24 households impacted, mostly seniors, mostly single women, people Karen thought wouldn't fight back. She had no idea her latest violation had landed on a property where 3 detectives, 2 analysts, and 1 criminal investigator were having lunch, and we weren't about to let it slide. It was 2:17 p.m. on a warm Wednesday when Karen made her final, fatal move. She called in backup. I'd just returned from running errands when I saw them, 2 men in navy polos with laminated name badges clipped to their collars, standing in my driveway beside Karen. One held a clipboard, the other had a phone out, filming. Karen stood between them like a queen behind her knights. "Sir," the man with the clipboard barked, "you're being cited for repeated gatherings exceeding community decibel standards, unapproved visitor vehicles, and non-native landscaping violations." I stared. Non-native landscaping. "Your bamboo exceeds the visual density allowance," Karen added, lips pursed like she was about to spit vinegar. I took a breath and stepped closer. "You want to tell me which ordinance you're quoting?" "The Hampton Tranquility Overlay," she snapped, like it was federal law. Ben and Leo were inside, but they'd heard the commotion. They stepped onto the porch together, 2 6-foot guys in plain clothes. Calm expressions, sharp eyes. Karen froze when she saw Leo. Maybe she remembered the badge from last time. Leo gave her a tight smile. "Still pretending you have authority?" One of the men raised his phone higher, still filming. "I need you all to vacate the property. This is a compliance intervention." That's when I pulled out my own phone and hit record. "You're trespassing," I said, voice steady. "You're impersonating authority. And that's a crime." Karen scoffed. "You're overreacting." Leo stepped down from the porch, flipping his badge open once more. "Detective Leonardo Acosta, State Criminal Division. I've already submitted evidence to the county prosecutor regarding your fake citations and attempted extortion. I suggest you get a lawyer." The guy with the clipboard laughed, nervous, high-pitched. "You're bluffing." Ben joined him on the lawn, calm as ever. "You filed mail-based threats to a government employee, vandalized state property, and falsely identified as regulatory officials. That's not bluffing. That's felony behavior." The second officer suddenly looked pale. He started backing away. Karen's face changed from smug to stunned to something worse. She knew. She'd picked the wrong house, the wrong party to report. The next 2 hours moved fast. We'd already filed formal complaints with the county, and Leo had looped in a friend at the district attorney's office. By 5:01 p.m., a warrant was drafted. By 6:30 p.m., 2 county investigators knocked on Karen's door, real ones, in real uniforms. She refused to come out at first, claimed harassment. Then she screamed something about neighborhood sovereignty through a window. They went in anyway. She was detained that night, Charges included impersonating a code official, misdemeanor fraud, vandalism of private property, misuse of emergency resources, criminal intimidation. The two men she brought fined and released. One confessed immediately, said he thought it was just a civil thing. Karen didn't confess. Not right away. She tried to play victim, tried to say she was protecting the community. That's when the email surfaced. Ben had subpoenaed the fake HOA inbox. Over 80 notices sent out. Dozens of digital payments, photos she'd taken of people's yards, sometimes through windows. She wasn't just playing pretend. She was surveilling. The news broke the next day. Local woman posing as HOA president. Arrested after confrontation with detectives. The photo showed her in cuffs, hair messy, arms tense. Neighbors who once obeyed her out of fear now stood taller. People started removing her violation signs. Someone set fire to one and posted the video online. It went viral, but I didn't celebrate. I walked down the street, removed a flyer from an elderly neighbor's porch, and just breathed. Because Karen's downfall wasn't just karma. It was a warning about the kind of power people give to fear and what happens when someone finally says no. Karen's arrest didn't just send shockwaves through the neighborhood, it split the cul-de-sac wide open. The same people who used to bow their heads when she passed, they were angry now, but not just at her. They were angry at themselves. Angry they believed her, gave her power, let her post signs and shout orders and hand out fines with no legal weight. Angry that no one questioned it until a few detectives came to lunch. Her name started disappearing from group chats, scrubbed from old emails, struck through on paper flyers taped to lampposts. But the mess she left behind that didn't go away overnight. That weekend, I helped Mr. Cole, he's 73 and still sharp as a tack, go through the old invoices he'd kept. Karen had fined him for having too many rose bushes, then again for unapproved paver stones along his driveway. He paid her over $1,000 across 14 months. She said it was cheaper than going through arbitration, he muttered. Nicole helped Mrs. Dean, the widow across the street, install a new mailbox after Karen had hers ripped out by one of her compliance officers. Claimed it was 2 inches too high. Ben called it what it was, harassment. Leo called it something else, a con. But I just called it a failure of trust. Not because we didn't see it happening, but because we thought being polite was safer than being right. By Monday, the charges against Karen were formalized. Her bond was denied due to risk of witness intimidation. Apparently, she'd already tried to text 3 people from jail, telling them to stay quiet and deny everything. It backfired. Each of them forwarded those messages directly to the district attorney's office. Greg, her husband, had tried to play dumb, claimed he didn't know what she was up to, but he was listed as the financial administrator on all her fake compliance portals. He even signed several warning letters himself. He lawyered up quick. Didn't matter. The charges stuck to both of them like wet cement. The best part. The county launched an official task force called Residential Integrity and Fraud Enforcement, or RIFE for short. Guess who they tapped as lead advisor, Leo? Guess who joined the community liaison board, Sophia, the neighbor who got cited for a beagle? And Ben, he submitted a proposal to make Karen's scam into a case study for internal affairs training. Said it was a textbook example of unchecked authority, community psychology, and neighbor-on-neighbor coercion. I couldn't argue. Meanwhile, the neighborhood transformed. Flyers came down. Porches got repainted, not because someone told them to, but because people wanted to. Someone hosted a block party for the first time in 3 years. Mr. Cole DJ'd with his old vinyl setup. Mrs. Dean brought pie. And in the middle of it all, Sophia stood up and raised a glass to quiet Sundays, loud kids, nosy neighbors who actually care, and to knowing we don't need a clipboard to be a community. That night, I sat on the porch with Nicole and watched the paper lanterns flicker across the street. "You think it's really over?" she asked me. I sipped my drink and smiled. For Karen, yeah. But the lesson, that's just beginning, because power doesn't come from fake charters or websites or laminated badges. It comes from people. And when people stop questioning where the power comes from, they end up answering to a woman with a clipboard and too much free time. Karen's trial drew statewide attention. The courtroom overflowed reporters, neighbors, victims, and a few curious attorneys looking to study what they all called a landmark case in suburban overreach. The charges laid out like a roadmap of manipulation, impersonation of a public official, wire fraud, mail fraud, intimidation and coercion of vulnerable persons, conspiracy to commit community fraud. Greg, under pressure and probably realizing his white polo days were numbered, turned state witness. He testified for nearly 2 hours, laying out the scam in full color, how Karen printed her own letterhead, how she designed violations based on which neighbors annoyed her, how she targeted seniors first because they were least likely to push back, how she pocketed every dollar in an account labeled HOA General Fund, even though no HOA existed, and how she kept a watch list of properties to purge. My name was on page 1. When the jury returned, it took them less than 4 hours. Guilty, on all counts. Karen Whitlock was sentenced to 11 years in state prison, no early parole. She cried when the sentence was read, but not from remorse, from rage. She screamed that she'd built order, that we'd all thank her someday, but the judge didn't flinch, neither did we. Because order built on fear is not peace, it's just silence held at gunpoint by a clipboard. Her house was seized and liquidated. The proceeds were placed into a victim compensation fund administered through the county clerk's office. Every resident she'd fined or extorted received a check in the mail. Even Mr. Cole, he cried when he got his, said it wasn't about the money, said it just felt good to know someone believed him. 6 months later, we held the first Meadowview Community BBQ. Not organized by an HOA, not mandated, just neighbors. Voluntary, loud, beautiful. There were bounce houses, an open mic, free lemonade stands. Sophia taught a line dance. Leo grilled ribs. Ben gave a little speech about recognizing everyday intimidation and knowing when to say no. And I stood by the fence that once caused a scandal, now painted blue. A little taller, still standing, just like us. The town passed a new ordinance later that year. All community enforcement actions must be tied to a legally registered homeowners association, verified through county channels. No fake boards, no pretend bylaws, no more Karens with God complexes and printed emblems. They called it the Community Oversight and Protection Resolution. It passed unanimously. You don't need a badge to speak up. You don't need a title to demand justice. You don't need permission to defend your space, your peace, or your neighbors. But you do need courage, because power unchecked becomes poison, and silence. Silence is the soil where fear grows its roots. So if someone waves a rule in your face, if they flash fake authority, if they whisper threats behind a veil of civility, ask questions, speak up, shine a light, because community isn't built by rules. It's built by people. People who care enough to stand, even when it's uncomfortable. Has something like this ever happened in your community? Have you ever stood up to fake authority or been silenced by it? Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk about fear, justice, and the real power of neighborhoods that fight back.